Marcus Whitfield grabbed the chair and hurled it across the living room. Glass shattered. His hands were shaking. On the table sat 14 resignation letters. Every single nanny he'd ever hired for his twin sons had quit. The agency just called. No one else would come. His 5-year-old boys were upstairs destroying their room, screaming for a mother they never met. And Marcus, a man who controlled a billion-dollar empire, couldn't control his own house. He was losing his sons. And he didn't even know it yet. But what happened 3 weeks later, when a black housekeeper from Memphis walked through that door with nothing but a duffel bag and a prayer that changed everything, and not in the way anyone expected. Before we begin, like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And I promise you, this one's going to stay with you. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Marcus Whitfield was sitting in the back of a black sedan halfway between O'Hare and his Lake Forest mansion when his house manager's name lit up the screen. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Whitfield." Margaret's voice was tight, too controlled. The kind of calm that only comes when someone's already past panic and into surrender. "Margaret, I'm 20 minutes out." "Nanny Patricia is gone, sir." Marcus closed his eyes. "What do you mean, gone?" "She packed her things an hour ago. Took a cab. She's not coming back." "What happened?" Margaret paused. "Ethan bit her." "He bit her?" "On the arm, sir. Drew blood. She's talking about pressing charges." Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. "She signed an NDA." "She signed a nanny contract, Mr. Whitfield, not a combat waiver." He could hear it in Margaret's voice. Something she wouldn't say, something she'd been holding for months. "Just say it, Margaret." "That's the 14th one, sir. 14 nannies in 3 years. The agency called this afternoon. They won't send anyone else. No one wants to work in your house." The sedan pulled through the gates. The mansion was lit up, every window, at midnight. "Where are the boys?" Ethan locked himself in the upstairs bathroom. Caleb hasn't spoken since dinner. He's sitting on the kitchen floor drawing on the wall with a black marker. Marcus hung up, walked through the front door. The marble foyer echoed his footsteps. He loosened his tie and headed for the kitchen. Caleb was exactly where Margaret said. Cross-legged on the cold tile floor. 5 years old. Small for his age. Dark hair falling over his eyes. He was drawing something on the baseboard. A figure tall with no face. "Caleb." The boy didn't look up. "Caleb, look at me." Nothing, just the sound of marker on wood. Marcus crouched down. "Who is that?" "What are you drawing?" Caleb's hand stopped. He stared at the faceless figure. Then he set the marker down, stood up, and walked past his father without a word. Marcus stayed crouched on the kitchen floor, staring at the drawing. A tall man with no face. He knew who it was. Upstairs, the bathroom door was locked. Marcus knocked. "Ethan, open the door." "No." "Open the door. Now." "I said no." Marcus leaned his forehead against the wood. "Why did you bite her?" Silence. "Ethan, I need you to tell me why." The lock clicked. The door opened slowly. Ethan stood there, 5 years old. Same dark hair as his brother. But his eyes were different, harder, older than they should have been. His knuckles were red. He'd been hitting the wall. "She tried to hug me," Ethan said. "And you bit her for that. She's not Mom." The words hit Marcus like a freight train. She's not Mom, and she kept pretending she was, calling us sweetheart, trying to hold us. She's not Mom. None of them are Mom. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Ethan looked up at him. "And you're never here. So what's the point?" Then he walked past his father, same as Caleb. Down the hall. Into the dark. Marcus stood alone in the hallway. The house was enormous. 6 bedrooms, 4 floors, a view of the lake. And it had never felt this empty. He walked into his office, sat behind his desk, 14 resignation letters in a stack. He opened the most recent one. Patricia's handwriting was shaky. "Mr. Whitfield, I've worked with difficult children for 20 years. Your sons are not difficult. They are in pain. Deep, unresolved pain. They don't need another nanny. They need their father. I wish you could see that. I hope someday you will." He set it down. Picked up the next one. Nanny Ruth. 3 months she'd lasted the longest anyone had made it. These boys are brilliant. Ethan is sharp and fierce and protective. Caleb feels everything so deeply he can't find words for it. They are not the problem, Mr. Whitfield. The absence is. I'm sorry. I can't fill a space that belongs to someone else. Marcus read every single letter. All 14. Different handwriting, different women, different words. But the same message. Over and over. The same message. They need their father. He set the stack down. Pulled open his desk drawer. Inside a photograph he hadn't looked at in years. Victoria. His wife. Taken 3 days before the delivery. She was laughing, her hand on her belly. 2 boys inside. 2 lives about to begin. 1 life about to end. It was Margaret who found the cleaning agency. 3 days after Patricia left the house was falling apart. Dishes piled in the sink. Laundry everywhere. Ethan had thrown a lamp through the playroom window. Caleb hadn't spoken a single word in 72 hours. Marcus was in Tokyo. Merger talks. He sent Margaret a text, "Handle it." She called every agency in Chicago, every service, every referral. The answer was always the same. "The Whitfield residence?" "No, ma'am. We've heard about that house. We can't help you." Finally, a small agency in Memphis, Southern Grace Home Services, picked up the phone. "We have 1 woman available," the dispatcher said. "She's not a nanny, she's a housekeeper. Cleaning, laundry, basic household maintenance. She can start tomorrow." "Does she have experience with children?" "Ma'am, she has experience with everything. But I should tell you, she's not what you'd expect." "What does that mean?" "It means she'll show up, and she won't quit." The next morning, Grace Monroe arrived at the Whitfield mansion at 6:15 a.m. She carried a small duffel bag, wore a clean navy dress, had a reference letter from a church shelter in Memphis folded in her pocket. She was 43 years old. She was black, and she was standing on the doorstep of one of the wealthiest white families in the Midwest. Margaret opened the door, looked her up and down. "You're from the agency?" "Yes, ma'am. Grace Monroe." Margaret hesitated. "The boys they're not easy." "I didn't come because it was easy." Margaret blinked. Then she stepped aside. "Come in." Grace walked into the house, set her bag by the door, looked around. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, fresh flowers on a table that nobody sat at. She'd cleaned homes like this before. Big houses with cold hearts. Families that looked perfect in photographs but couldn't sit in the same room together. She knew the type. Margaret handed her a list. "Mr. Whitfield wants the main floor cleaned, laundry sorted, kitchen maintained. Stay out of the boys' way. Don't engage with them. Don't try to discipline them. Just clean." Grace folded the list and put it in her pocket. "Where are they now?" "Upstairs. And trust me, you'll hear them before you see them." Margaret wasn't wrong. Grace was mopping the kitchen floor when the crash came. Then footsteps. Fast, hard running. 2 boys burst through the doorway like a storm. Ethan saw her first. He stopped dead, looked her up and down. Something shifted in his face. Not fear, not curiosity. Calculation. "Who are you?" "I'm Grace. I'm here to help around the house." "You're not a nanny." "No." "Good, because we broke the last one." Caleb stood behind his brother, silent, watching. Ethan took 2 steps closer, picked up a ceramic bowl from the counter, held it up looking right at Grace. "If I throw this, you'll leave. They always leave." Grace didn't step back, didn't flinch. She set the mop against the counter and looked him dead in the eyes. "Throw it." Ethan's hand froze. "Go ahead. Throw it. If that's what you need to do right now, throw it." He didn't know what to do with that. Nobody had ever given him permission. Nobody had ever stood still. His arm started shaking. "I'll still be here when it breaks," Grace said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." The bowl slipped from his fingers, didn't shatter, just cracked on the tile. Ethan looked down at it, then back at Grace. She knelt down, picked up the pieces. "You want to help me clean this up?" He didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. He stood there watching her hands, watching her gather every broken piece without a word of anger. Caleb took one step forward, then another. He reached down and picked up a small shard, set it in Grace's hand. She looked at him. "Thank you, sweetheart." His eyes flickered, just for a second, like a light someone had turned off a long time ago trying to turn back on. Then Ethan grabbed his brother's arm. "Come on." And they disappeared upstairs. Grace stayed on the kitchen floor, holding the broken pieces, breathing. Margaret appeared in the doorway. "I saw that." "It's fine." "It's not fine. That boy throws things at everyone. Patricia got a plate to the face her second day." Grace stood up. "He wasn't trying to hit me." "How do you know?" "Because he aimed for the wall." Margaret stared at her. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Probably both." That afternoon things got worse. Grace was sorting laundry in the hallway when she felt a tug on the mop she'd left leaning against the wall. She turned around. Nobody there. She reached for it. Gone. She heard giggling, followed the sound, down the hall, around the corner. The supply closet door was open. "Your mop's in here," Ethan's voice called. "Come get it." Grace knew. She knew exactly what was going to happen. She walked in anyway. The door slammed behind her. The lock clicked. Darkness. Footsteps running away. Laughter echoing. Grace stood in the dark closet, cleaning supplies on every shelf. The smell of bleach and lemon. She could have banged on the door. Could have yelled. Could have called Margaret. She sat down on a bucket, pulled out her phone, opened her Bible app, and read. 25 minutes later, Margaret found her. "Grace? Oh my God, are you?" "I'm fine. Those boys I'm calling Mr. Whitfield." "Don't." Margaret stopped. "What? Don't call him. It'll only make it worse. They're testing me, that's all." "Testing you, they locked you in a closet." Grace stepped out, straightened her dress. "I know, and I'm still here." That night Grace should have gone to her room, should have rested, should have done what every other nanny and housekeeper and specialist had done, put distance between herself and those boys. Instead, at 10 p.m., she walked upstairs. The boys' rooms were at the end of the hall. She could hear them. Whispers. Movement. No sleep. She knocked softly. Nothing. She opened the door. Ethan and Caleb were both on Ethan's bed. Caleb was curled up tight, face buried in the pillow. Ethan sat beside him, one hand on his brother's back, protective like a soldier. "What do you want?" Ethan's voice was hard. "Nothing. I just came to check on you." "We don't need checking on." Grace pulled a chair over. Sat down. Not too close. "Okay. Then I'll just sit here." "Why?" "Because nobody should be awake alone at night." Ethan's jaw tightened. "We're not alone. We have each other." "I know you do. And that's something." Caleb turned his head slightly. One eye visible, watching. The room was quiet for a long time. Grace didn't push, didn't talk, just sat. Then Ethan said very quietly, "The other ones always left at night." "What do you mean?" "The nannies. They'd say goodnight, and then we'd hear the front door close. Some of them didn't even make it to morning. One left at 2 a.m. We heard her car. Grace's chest tightened. We used to bet on it, Ethan said. Me and Caleb. How long they'd last. I said Patricia would make it a week. Caleb held up 3 fingers. She lasted 5 days. His voice dropped. It's kind of funny. Except it's not. No, Grace said. It's not. You're going to leave too. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Everyone does. Mom left. Dad left. They all leave. The room went dead quiet. Grace leaned forward. Your mom didn't leave Ethan. She didn't choose to go. How do you know? Because no mother chooses to leave her babies. Then why isn't she here? Grace's eyes burned. She swallowed hard. Sometimes the most unfair things in the world happen to the people who deserve them the least. Your mama brought you into this world and it cost her everything. But she didn't leave. She gave. There's a difference. Ethan's face crumbled, just for a second. Then he rebuilt it, hardened it, the way he'd learned to. Dad doesn't even talk about her. Maybe it hurts him too much. Then he's a coward. Grace didn't argue, didn't correct him. She just let the word hang in the air. Caleb moved, sat up, looked at Grace with those wide, silent eyes. Then he reached under his pillow and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. A drawing. He held it out to her. Grace took it, looked. 2 small figures, standing in front of a big house, alone. No one else in the picture. Just 2 boys and an empty house and a sky colored entirely in black. Her hands trembled. That's us, Ethan said. That's all there is. Grace folded the drawing carefully. Can I keep this? Caleb nodded. She put it in her pocket, close to her heart. I'm going to tell you something, Grace said. And I need you to hear me. Really hear me. Both boys looked at her. I don't know what tomorrow looks like. I don't know if your dad's going to come home. I don't know if things are going to get easier. But I know this right now, right here, you're not alone. And I'm not leaving tonight. Ethan's lip quivered. You promise? I promise. People break promises. Some people do. I don't. She didn't leave. She sat in that chair all night. When Ethan finally fell asleep around midnight, his hand was hanging off the bed. When Caleb drifted off 20 minutes later, he'd moved closer to the edge, closer to Grace. And somewhere around 2 a.m., when the house was completely still, Grace Monroe bowed her head and whispered into the darkness. Lord, I don't know why you sent me here. But these boys are drowning, and their father is drowning too. I can't fix this. But you can. So I'm asking, just show me what to do. One day at a time. That's all I need. The next morning, Grace found a small gray rock on her pillow. A smiley face drawn on it in red crayon. No note. No name. But she knew. She held it in her palm, closed her fingers around it, and for the first time in that house, something that had been broken for a very long time began to shift. 2,000 miles away, Marcus Whitfield sat in a Tokyo boardroom staring at a contract worth $200 million. His phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. The new housekeeper stayed through the night. The boys slept. First time in weeks. He stared at the message. Read it again. Then set the phone face down on the table and turned back to the contract. But something had moved. Something he couldn't name. Something he wouldn't understand until it was almost too late. Grace didn't sleep well that first week. Not because of the house or the bed or the sounds the old mansion made when the wind came off the lake. She didn't sleep because every time she closed her eyes, she saw that drawing. 2 small boys. A black sky. Nobody else. She kept it folded in her pocket, carried it everywhere. By the 3rd morning, she'd learned the rhythm of the house. Margaret arrived at 7, started coffee, organized the day's schedule. The cook came at 8, left by noon. A driver sat in the garage in case Marcus called, which he rarely did. 2 groundskeepers handled the lawn and the pool nobody used. The house ran like a machine. Everything polished, everything scheduled, everything under control. Except the boys. Ethan woke up angry. Every single day. His feet hit the floor, and something in him ignited like a fuse that had been lit before he even opened his eyes. He came downstairs, swinging, knocking things off tables, slamming doors, testing every person in his path. Caleb was the opposite. He drifted through the house like smoke. No sound, no words. He hadn't spoken since that night in the bedroom, and Grace didn't push him. She noticed he always had a marker or a pencil in his hand, always drawing, on paper when he could find it, on walls when he couldn't, on his own arms when there was nothing else. The drawings were always the same: figures without faces, houses with no doors, skies with no sun. On the 4th morning, Grace set a stack of blank sketch pads on the kitchen table. Next to them, a box of colored pencils. She didn't say a word about it, didn't point them out, just placed them there and went back to folding laundry. Caleb walked in 20 minutes later, saw the pads, looked at Grace. She didn't look up. He sat down, opened a pad, and started drawing. For the first time, he used color. A thin line of blue at the top of the page. Not much. But it was sky, and it wasn't black. Grace saw it from the corner of her eye. She kept folding, kept breathing, didn't make a single sound. Because she understood something about Caleb that nobody else had figured out. He wasn't silent, because he had nothing to say. He was silent because every time he'd tried to speak, nobody listened. So he stopped trying, and the drawings became his voice. She wasn't going to take that from him. She was going to let him speak the only way he knew how, until he was ready for words again. Ethan was a different problem entirely. That same morning, he came into the kitchen, saw Caleb drawing, and swept the pencils off the table with one arm. They scattered across the floor. "Those are stupid," he said. Caleb didn't react, just stared at the table. Grace set down the shirt she was folding. "Pick them up." Ethan turned to her. "What?" "The pencils. Pick them up." "No." "Ethan, pick them up." "You can't tell me what to do. You're the maid." Grace walked over, not fast, not angry. She stood in front of him and got down on one knee so they were eye to eye. "You're right. I'm the maid. I clean this house. I fold your clothes. I mop your floors. And I'm asking you to pick up those pencils, not because I'm in charge, because your brother was using them and you knocked them down. That's not about me. That's about him." Ethan's face twitched. He looked at Caleb, who was still staring at the table, hands flat, not moving. Something passed between the brothers. Something Grace couldn't read, but could feel, a language built in the womb, carried through 5 years of shared loss, shared silence, shared war. Ethan bent down, picked up the pencils, one by one, set them back on the table. Then he looked at Grace. "Happy? I'm not the one you should be asking." He turned to Caleb. Didn't say sorry. Didn't need to. Just pushed the pencil box a little closer to his brother. Caleb picked up the blue pencil and went back to drawing. Grace went back to folding. Nobody said another word. But something had happened in that kitchen. Something small and real. A crack in the wall Ethan had spent 5 years building. It was the first of many. By the end of the first week, Grace had figured out Ethan's trigger. It wasn't noise or chaos or being told no. It was feeling invisible. Every time someone walked past him without speaking, every time a phone rang, and nobody looked up, every time the house went quiet, in that heavy adult way, Ethan exploded. Because destruction was visible. Thrown chairs got attention. Broken glass got a reaction. It was the only proof he had that he existed in a house full of people who were paid to be there but didn't choose to stay. So Grace started doing something nobody else had thought to do. She acknowledged him. Every single time. "Morning, Ethan." "Hey, Ethan, I'm making sandwiches. You want one?" "Ethan, come look at this. There's a cardinal on the fence." Small things, ordinary things, the kind of things a mother would say. Not grand gestures, just presence. Just his name spoken by someone who wasn't reading it off a chart. He didn't know what to do with it at first. He'd grunt, walk away. Sometimes he'd throw something just to see if she'd stop. She never stopped. "Morning, Ethan," even after he knocked a glass off the counter. "How'd you sleep, Ethan?" Even after he called her a name that made Margaret gasp from the doorway. Grace didn't react to the name, didn't flinch, didn't lecture. She just looked at him and said, "You can do better than that." He stared at her. "What?" "If you're going to try to hurt me, you're going to have to do better than that. I've heard worse from grown men. You're 5. You've got time to learn." His mouth opened, closed. He didn't know what to say. Nobody had ever refused to be hurt by him before. Every nanny, every specialist, every adult who walked through that door, they all reacted. They yelled or cried or quit or called his father. Grace just stood there, unbroken, unmoved, like a wall he couldn't knock down. And for the first time in his life, Ethan Whitfield didn't want to knock it down. He wanted to understand why it was still standing. The second week, he started sitting closer to her. Not next to her, not touching, just closer. In the kitchen while she cooked, in the hallway while she mopped. He'd lean against the wall and watch, arms crossed, pretending he didn't care. "You don't have to stand there," Grace said one afternoon. "You can sit." "I'm fine." "Suit yourself." 10 minutes later, he sat down. They didn't talk. Grace hummed while she worked low, steady, an old hymn her grandmother used to sing. She didn't think about it, just let it come. And she noticed something. When she hummed, Ethan's shoulders dropped. His jaw unclenched, his breathing slowed. The boy who couldn't handle noise found peace in a sound nobody had ever offered him. Not the sharp orders of a nanny, not the clinical tone of a therapist. Just a hum. Just a woman's voice filling the silence with something warm. One afternoon, Ethan broke a plate. Not on purpose this time, it slipped from his hands while he was carrying it to the sink. It shattered on the tile. He froze. Looked at Grace. His eyes went wide, terrified, like he was bracing for the explosion. Grace walked over. "You okay? Cut yourself?" He shook his head. "Good. Plates break. That's what they do." "You're not mad." "Why would I be mad? It was an accident." "Patricia screamed at me when I broke a plate." "Well, Patricia's not here." He stared at the broken pieces. "She said I was destructive, that I break everything I touch." Grace knelt down beside him, started picking up the shards. "You know what I think? I think you've had a lot of people tell you what you are. Destructive, difficult, impossible. And I think you started believing them." He didn't answer. "But I'm looking at a boy who was trying to carry his plate to the sink. That's not destructive. That's helpful. The plate just didn't cooperate." The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Not quite, but closer than anyone had gotten in 3 years. "You want to help me sweep this up?" Grace asked. He nodded. She handed him the dustpan. They cleaned it up together side by side, and when they were done, Grace put her hand on his shoulder. Just for a second. He didn't pull away. That night, Margaret found Grace in the laundry room, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. 2 weeks, Margaret said. Grace looked up. "What? You've been here 2 weeks. That's longer than 9 of the 14 nannies." "I'm not a nanny." "No, you're not, and maybe that's why it's working." Margaret paused. "He carried his plates to the sink today. First time he's ever done that." He wanted to help. He's never wanted to help anyone. "Grace, what are you doing to these boys?" Grace folded a towel, set it on the stack. "I'm not doing anything to them. I'm just here." "That's not nothing. Maybe it hasn't been tried before." Margaret shook her head slowly. "His father spends $40,000 a month on specialists, behavioral therapists, child psychologists. A woman from Switzerland with 2 doctorates who lasted exactly 11 days. And you're telling me all they needed was someone to just be here. I'm telling you they needed someone who wasn't going to leave." Margaret went quiet. Then she said very softly, "Don't prove me wrong, Grace. Please. I've watched those boys lose too many people. I'm not going anywhere." "I've heard that before." "I know, but I mean it." Margaret held her gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded, once, and walked away. The third week, everything accelerated. Ethan started talking to Grace. Really talking. Not the guarded hostile words he used like weapons, but real words. Questions. Stories. Fragments of a life he'd been holding inside. "Dad used to read to us," he said one afternoon, sitting on the kitchen floor while Grace scrubbed the counters. "When we were really little, like 2 or 3. He'd sit on the floor between our beds and read this book about a bear. I don't remember the title, but I remember his voice." Grace kept scrubbing. "What did it sound like?" "Low, slow, like he wasn't in a hurry." Ethan picked at a thread on his sock. "He doesn't sound like that anymore. Now he talks fast, on the phone, always on the phone." "When was the last time he read to you?" Ethan thought about it. "I don't know. Maybe when we were 3. After Nanny number 6 quit, he stopped coming to our room at night. Said he was too busy. Margaret started doing bedtime." "And how was that?" "Margaret's fine. She does the routine, teeth pajamas, lights out. But she doesn't read. She just says goodnight and closes the door." "Do you want someone to read to you?" He looked at her sharply. "I'm not a baby." "I didn't say you were. I asked if you wanted someone to read to you. Those are different things." He pulled the thread until it snapped. "Maybe. Sometimes. When it's dark and I can't sleep." That night, Grace went to the library on the 2nd floor, found a shelf of children's books covered in dust. Nobody had touched them in years. She pulled one out. A story about a bear. She walked to the boys' room, knocked. "Can I come in?" Silence. Then Ethan's voice. "Yeah." She sat in the chair beside the bed. Caleb was already under the covers, eyes open, watching. Ethan sat up against the headboard, arms crossed, trying to look indifferent. Grace opened the book. Started reading. Low, slow. Like she wasn't in a hurry. 3 pages in, Ethan's arms uncrossed. 5 pages in, he slid down against the pillow. By the end of the story, Caleb had rolled over to face her, his hand hanging off the edge of the bed. She closed the book. "Good night, boys." "Grace." "Yeah." "Can you read another one?" She read 3 more. By the 4th, both boys were asleep. Grace set the book on the chair, pulled the blanket over Caleb's shoulder, brushed the hair from Ethan's forehead, stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching them breathe. Then she went to her room and cried. Quietly, hands over her mouth. Because she knew what these boys needed. She knew it in her bones. And she also knew that she was the maid, the housekeeper, the woman who was hired to mop floors and fold laundry, and sooner or later someone was going to remind her of that. But not tonight. Tonight, 2 boys slept through the whole night for the first time in months, and that was enough. Marcus called on a Friday, not the house phone, Grace's cell. Margaret had given him the number. "This is Marcus Whitfield." Grace was folding sheets. She set them down. "Yes, sir." "Margaret tells me the boys have been calmer. They've been good. She says Ethan hasn't thrown anything in 4 days. 5, actually." Silence on the line. Then, "What are you doing differently?" Grace thought about it. "I'm not doing anything differently, Mr. Whitfield. I'm just doing what nobody else had time to do." "And what's that, Kiki, staying?" More silence. Longer this time. "I'll be home next Thursday," Marcus said. "London deal is closing. The boys would like that." "Would they?" Grace's hand tightened on the phone. "Yes, sir, they would. Ethan asks about you, every day." "He does? Every single day? He asked me this morning if you were coming home for his birthday. Their birthday isn't for 3 months." I know. That's how far ahead he's planning for you." The line went quiet. Grace could hear something in the silence, not indifference, not coldness. Something heavier. Something that sounded like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down, afraid to jump. "I'll be home Thursday," Marcus said again, quieter this time. "We'll be here." He hung up. Grace set the phone down, picked up the sheets, went back to work, but her hands were shaking. Because she'd heard it in his voice, the same thing she heard in Ethan's, the same thing she saw in Caleb's drawings. The same wound passed down like an inheritance nobody asked for. These boys weren't just missing a mother. They were missing a father who was right there, alive, breathing, reachable. And that was the cruelest part. The people we lose to death, we grieve. The people we lose to absence, we blame ourselves. Thursday came. Marcus didn't come home. His assistant called Margaret at 4 p.m. "Mr. Whitfield's been delayed. The London meeting extended through the weekend. He sends his apologies." Margaret hung up, looked at Grace, didn't say a word. Grace walked upstairs. The boys were in their room. Ethan was building something with blocks, a tower tall and unsteady. Caleb was drawing at the desk. "Hey guys." Ethan looked up. "Is Dad home?" Grace sat on the edge of the bed. "Not today, buddy. His meetings ran late." Ethan's hand stopped. The tower wobbled. "He said Thursday." "I know. He said Thursday." His voice was getting tight. "He promised." "I know Ethan. He always does this." Ethan stood up. His fists clenched. "He says he's coming and then he doesn't, every single time." He knocked the tower over. Blocks scattered across the floor. "Every single time." Caleb's pencil stopped. He looked at his brother, then at Grace. His eyes were wet. Grace didn't try to calm Ethan down, didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't okay. She just sat there, present, steady, and waited. Ethan kicked the blocks, then kicked them again. Then he stopped. His chest was heaving, his face was red, and then he did something he'd never done in front of another person. He cried. Not a scream. Not a tantrum. Just tears. Silent, shaking tears from a 5-year-old boy who'd been holding it all together because someone had to. Grace opened her arms. She didn't reach for him, just opened them and waited. He walked into them, pressed his face against her shoulder, and sobbed. Caleb got up from the desk, walked over, stood beside them. Then he leaned in, wrapped his small arms around his brother and Grace both. They held each other. 3 people in a room full of scattered blocks and broken promises. After a long time, Ethan pulled back, wiped his face with his sleeve. "Don't tell anyone I cried." "I won't. Especially not Dad." "I won't." He looked at her, red-eyed, exhausted. "Grace, do you think he even wants us?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She took his face in her hands. Both hands. Looked him straight in the eyes. "Listen to me. Your father loves you. He does. He's just broken right now. And broken people don't always know how to show up, even when they want to. That's not your fault. That was never your fault. You hear me?" Ethan's lip trembled. "Then why won't he come home?" Grace pulled him close, held him tight, and whispered the only honest thing she had. "I don't know, baby, but I'm going to be here until he does." That night, she read them 4 books, stayed until they fell asleep. Then she walked downstairs, sat at the kitchen table in the dark, and stared at her phone. She wanted to call Marcus Whitfield, wanted to tell him what his son had asked, wanted to say the words that 14 nannies had put in resignation letters that he'd probably never read. But she didn't. Because she was the maid. And the maid doesn't call the billionaire at midnight to tell him he's failing his children. So she prayed instead. The way she always did. Quiet. Simple. Honest. "Lord, I don't know how to fix this. I can love these boys. I can stay. I can show up every morning and read to them every night. But I can't be their father. Only he can do that. So whatever it takes, whatever it costs, please bring him home. Not for me, for them. She sat in the dark kitchen for a long time after that. The house creaked around her. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere upstairs, two boys were sleeping peacefully for the 17th night in a row. And 2,000 miles away, in a hotel suite in London, Marcus Whitfield sat on the edge of his bed, holding his phone, staring at a photo of his sons that Margaret had sent that afternoon. Ethan and Caleb at the kitchen table, eating sandwiches. Caleb was drawing. Ethan was looking at someone just off camera, smiling. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd seen his son smile. He set the phone down, picked up the contract on the nightstand. $200 million, the biggest deal of his career. He read the first line, read it again. Couldn't focus, set it back down, picked up the phone, looked at the photo one more time. Ethan was smiling, at someone he couldn't see, someone who was there when Marcus wasn't. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, Marcus Whitfield felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Shame. The kind that doesn't come from failure. The kind that comes from knowing you had everything that mattered and walked away from it. The kind that sits in your chest at 2 a.m. in a foreign city and whispers the truth you've been running from. You're losing them. You're losing them, and you don't even know how to go back. He put the phone face down on the nightstand, turned off the light, stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come. It wouldn't. Not tonight. Not with that smile burned into his mind. Not with his son's voice echoing from a conversation he wasn't there for, asking a woman he barely knew the question he should have answered years ago. Do you think he even wants us? Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes. His chest was tight. His throat was closing. And somewhere in the darkness of that London hotel room, a wall he'd spent 5 years building began to crack. Marcus flew home on a Monday. He didn't tell anyone. Didn't call Margaret. Didn't text the driver. He just walked out of the London meeting at 2 p.m., told his assistant to cancel everything, and took the first flight back to Chicago. 7 hours in the air. He didn't sleep, didn't work. Just sat in first class staring at that photograph on his phone. Ethan smiling at someone off camera. The car service dropped him at the gate just after 4 p.m. He stood there for a moment with his briefcase looking at the house. His house. The house he and Victoria bought the year they got married. The house where his sons were born. The house he'd turned into something closer to a facility than a home. He walked through the front door, put his key in the lock the way he had 1,000 times, stepped inside, and stopped. The house was quiet, but not the dead, hollow quiet he was used to. This was different. This had weight. This had warmth, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. He set his briefcase down. Boys. Nothing. He walked through the foyer. Kitchen empty, but there were dishes in the drying rack. Small ones. Kid-sized. Someone had eaten lunch together. The playroom toys on shelves instead of scattered across the floor. A stack of sketch pads on the table. Colored pencils in a cup. His chest tightened. He moved faster. He climbed the stairs. The hallway was dim. He could hear something coming from the boys' room. Not screaming, not crashing. A voice, low and steady. He reached the door. It was open a few inches. He pressed his hand against it, pushed it slowly. And what he saw broke him in half. Ethan and Caleb were on their knees beside the bed, hands folded, eyes closed. Grace was kneeling between them, her hands resting gently on their backs. God, Ethan was saying, his voice was small and clear. Thank you for today. Thank you that nobody got hurt. Thank you for Grace. He paused. And please help Dad come home soon. Not for work, for real. Help him want to be here. Caleb made a sound. Not a word, a murmur low and soft like agreement. Like amen without the syllables. Grace's voice came next, barely a whisper. Lord, you see these boys. You know what they need. Hold them close tonight. Let them feel it. Let them know they're not forgotten. Marcus's hand slid off the door. His knees buckled. He grabbed the door frame, but it wasn't enough. He went down. Right there in the hallway. His back against the wall. His legs folded under him. His $4,000 suit crumpled on the hardwood floor. 5 years. 5 years since Victoria died. 5 years of flights and meetings and contracts and deals. 5 years of telling himself the boys were fine, that money could fix it, that the next nanny would be the one, that he just needed more time. 5 years, and he hadn't cried once. Not at the funeral. Not in the delivery room. Not when he held Victoria's hand after it went cold. He'd locked it all down, sealed it behind concrete and work and distance, because if he ever let it out, he didn't think he'd survive it. But hearing his son pray for him to come home, hearing that small voice ask God to make his father want to be there, that shattered every wall he'd ever built. He pressed his hands over his face. His shoulders shook. No sound. Just grief. 5 years of it pouring out of him like a flood breaking through a dam. He didn't know how long he sat there. Could have been a minute. Could have been 10. When he finally looked up, Grace was standing in the doorway. She didn't speak. Didn't move. Just looked at him with those steady, quiet eyes. No judgment. No pity. Just recognition. Like she'd been waiting for this and wasn't surprised it had come. "How long?" Marcus said. His voice was wrecked. "How long has he been praying like that?" "About a week." "A week?" "He asked me to teach him, said he saw me doing it one night and wanted to try." Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes. "And Caleb?" "Caleb listens. He doesn't say the words yet, but he's there. He's always there." "I didn't know." His voice cracked. "I didn't know they wanted me here." Grace leaned against the doorframe. "Mr. Whitfield, those boys have wanted you here every single day of their lives. Every nanny that walked through that door, every therapist, every specialist, they weren't fighting those people. They were fighting the fact that none of those people were you." He looked up at her. "They told me the boys were impossible. Violent. Out of control. They're 5. They lost their mother before they opened their eyes. And their father left right after. They're not out of control. They've never had anything to hold on to. Except you." Grace shook her head. "I'm temporary. I'm the maid. They need something permanent. They need their father." Marcus pulled himself up off the floor. His legs were unsteady. He wiped his face with the back of his hand. Looked through the doorway at his sons, still kneeling by the bed, waiting for Grace to come back and finish. "What do I do?" he said. "I don't know how to do this." "You don't have to know how. You just have to be here. That's what everyone keeps telling me. Maybe you should start listening." He almost laughed. Almost. "You're not afraid of me, are you?" "No, sir, I'm not. Everyone else is." "Everyone else works for you. I work for your house. There's a difference." He looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman from Memphis, with a church reference and a duffel bag. This woman who'd done in 3 weeks what 14 nannies couldn't do in 3 years. This woman who was standing in front of a billionaire with red eyes and a crumpled suit, telling him the truth nobody else would say. "Thank you," he said. Grace nodded. "Don't thank me. Go in there. They're still awake." Marcus took a breath, straightened his jacket, walked into the room. Ethan opened his eyes, saw his father, froze. "Dad? Hey, buddy. You're home." "Yeah, I'm home." Ethan looked at Grace, then back at Marcus. "For how long?" The question hit Marcus like a knife. His 5-year-old son asking him for a departure date, like a hotel guest. Like a visitor. "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. "But I'm here tonight." "You promise?" "I promise." Ethan studied his face, searching for the lie, the excuse, the phone call that would pull him away. But Marcus didn't reach for his phone, didn't check his watch, just stood there. "Okay," Ethan said quietly. Caleb got up from the floor, walked over to his father, stood in front of him, looked up. Then he reached out and took Marcus's hand, just held it. Small fingers wrapped around his father's palm. Marcus's throat closed. He squeezed his son's hand, gently, afraid that if he held too tight this moment would break. They stood like that for a long time. Grace watched from the doorway, then quietly stepped back and disappeared down the hall. That night, Marcus sat on the floor between their beds. He didn't read a book. He didn't know where Grace kept them. He just sat there in the dark, listening to his sons breathe. Ethan fell asleep first. Caleb took longer, kept opening his eyes to check if Marcus was still there. "I'm here," Marcus whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Caleb closed his eyes. Slept. Marcus didn't move until morning. When the sun came up, he went downstairs, found the kitchen, turned on the coffee maker, tried to make toast, burned it, set off the smoke alarm. Stood there waving a towel at the ceiling, coughing when Margaret walked in. "Mr. Whitfield, what on earth?" "I'm making breakfast." Margaret stared at him. "You don't cook." "I'm learning." She looked at the blackened toast, the smoking toaster, the coffee that was somehow both watery and burnt. "Starting from the ground up, I see." "Margaret." "Yes, sir." "Can you teach me how to make eggs?" She blinked. Twice. Then she walked to the refrigerator, pulled out a carton of eggs, and set a pan on the stove. "Scrambled or fried?" "Whatever the boys like." "Scrambled, with cheese. Ethan picks out the cheese but eats it anyway." Marcus smiled. "Scrambled with cheese." Margaret cracked the eggs, showed him how to stir. Slow, gentle off the heat before they dried out. Grace walked in while they were plating. She stopped when she saw Marcus at the stove. "Mr. Taylor, Mr. Whitfield, you're still here." "I told you I would be." "You did." She paused. "That toast didn't make it, though." No, it didn't." She almost smiled. Almost. Then the boys came running in. They hit the kitchen doorway and stopped dead. Ethan looked at Marcus, at the stove, at the plates on the table. "Dad, you made breakfast." "Don't get too excited. Margaret did most of the work." Ethan sat down slowly, like the chair might disappear. Caleb climbed up next to him. They stared at the scrambled eggs. "Eat," Marcus said, "before it gets cold." They ate. All of them. At the same table. Burned toast and all. And for those 20 minutes, the Whitfield mansion felt like something it hadn't felt in 5 years. A home. Marcus stayed the next day. And the one after that. He moved his laptop to the kitchen table so he could work while the boys were nearby. He wasn't good at it. Kept taking calls, kept checking emails, kept slipping back into the rhythm of a man who'd been running for half a decade. But he was there, physically present, and the boys noticed. Ethan started bringing his blocks downstairs, building on the floor near Marcus's feet, not asking for attention, just proximity, just nearness. And Marcus for the first time let him. Caleb drew at the table, quiet as always. But his drawings changed. The figures started getting faces, round circles with dots for eyes, one tall figure next to 2 smaller ones, and off to the side a 4th figure with dark hair and kind hands. Grace saw the drawings but didn't say anything. She folded laundry, mopped floors, cooked meals, stayed in her lane. But she watched Marcus try and fail and try again, watched him burn more toast and make terrible coffee and sit on the floor reading books with a voice that was too fast, too stiff, not yet broken in. He was trying, and trying was everything. 2 days later, the front door opened without a knock. Robert Langford walked in like he owned the place. Suit pressed, jaw tight, eyes scanning the foyer like he was cataloging evidence. Margaret intercepted him in the hallway. "Mr. Langford. Mr. Whitfield didn't mention you were. Where is he?" "In his office, but—" Robert was already past her, down the hall, through the door. He didn't close it behind him. Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Robert, I wasn't expecting you." "No, you weren't." Robert pulled out his phone, placed it on the desk. Screen up. A photograph. Grace kneeling with the boys, hands folded, praying. "Where did you get that?" Marcus's voice went flat. "One of the household staff. Doesn't matter who. What matters is this." Robert pointed at the photo. "A black housekeeper, praying with your sons, in your home, acting like she's their mother. She's helping them. She's a liability." Robert's voice got sharp. "Marcus, do you understand what happens if this gets out? The press will eat us alive. The board will panic. Our investors in Geneva, do you think they want to see the Whitfield heirs being raised by the help?" "Don't call her that." "That's what she is. She's a maid, Marcus. A maid from Memphis with no credentials, no background, no... She's done more for my sons in 3 weeks than 14 nannies did in 3 years. Robert leaned forward. "I don't care what she's done. I care what it looks like. Perception is everything in this business. You taught me that. This isn't business. These are my children. Your children are the business. They're Whitfield heirs. Their name is on the letterhead. Everything we've built, the fund, the partnerships, the London deal, it's all tied to the family name. And right now that name is one leaked photo away from a scandal." Marcus stood up, slowly. "What do you want, Robert?" Robert pulled a folder from his briefcase, set it on the desk. "I've already made calls. A new nanny, Swiss, PhD in child behavioral psychology, published research, impeccable references. She can start Monday. I didn't ask for a new nanny. And I've drafted a severance package for the housekeeper. Generous. 6 months salary plus relocation assistance. She signs an NDA and walks away clean." "You drafted a severance package for my employee without asking me. Someone had to. You're too close to this." Marcus looked at the folder, then at Robert. "No." Robert blinked. "What?" "I said, no, she stays." "Marcus, listen to me. She stays. You're choosing a maid over a $600 million deal, over everything we've built, over 20 years of work." Marcus walked around the desk, stood face to face with his oldest friend, his business partner, the man who'd helped him build an empire from nothing after Victoria died. "Robert, 3 weeks ago, my son asked a stranger if I even wanted him. A 5-year-old boy looked at his housekeeper and asked if his own father wanted him to exist. That happened because I wasn't here, because I was always with you in a boardroom closing a deal that was supposed to matter." His voice didn't shake. "Grace Monroe showed my sons that someone would stay, that someone could see them and not run. She taught my boy to pray. My boy Robert. He's 5 years old, and he's on his knees asking God to bring his father home. And you want me to fire the woman who made that possible because it doesn't look good for the fund?" Robert's jaw tightened. "I'm trying to protect you. You're trying to protect the portfolio. There's a difference. Marcus? She stays. Final answer." Robert stared at him. The silence between them was thick. Years of partnership, years of trust, years of late nights and handshake deals and mutual ambition, all of it sitting on the edge of a knife. "You're making a mistake," Robert said quietly. "Maybe, but she stays." Robert picked up the folder, slid it back into his briefcase, walked toward the door, stopped, turned. "When this falls apart, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you." He walked out, down the hall, past the kitchen, past the laundry room, past Grace, who was standing in the hallway holding a stack of folded towels. Frozen. She'd heard every word. Every single word. Robert glanced at her as he passed. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. The look said everything. "You don't belong here." Grace watched him leave. Then she looked down the hall toward Marcus's office. The door was still open. She could hear him inside pacing, breathing hard. She set the towels on the table, went back to work, didn't say anything to anyone. But that night, after the boys were asleep, after Marcus had gone to his room, after Margaret had locked up and the house was dark, Grace sat on the edge of her bed. Her duffel bag was on the floor beside her. Everything she owned still inside it because she'd never fully unpacked. She thought about Ethan. The way he'd started smiling. The way he carried his plate to the sink now without being asked. She thought about Caleb. The drawings with faces. The thin lines of blue sky getting wider every day. She thought about Marcus in that doorway, tears on his face asking her what to do. And she thought about Robert Langford's words, "You're choosing a maid over a $600 million deal." And Marcus's answer, "She stays." He'd stood up for her. A billionaire stood in his own office and chose a housekeeper from Memphis over his business partner. That meant something. That meant everything. But Grace knew how the world worked. She'd lived 43 years in it. She knew that men like Robert don't lose gracefully. She knew that one leaked photo could destroy Marcus's company, his reputation, everything he'd built to keep his sons secure. And she knew that if she stayed, she'd become the reason it all fell apart. The boys would grow up knowing that the maid who prayed with them was the reason their father lost everything. And that weight, that guilt would crush them worse than anything they'd already survived. Grace pulled a piece of paper from the nightstand, found a pen, wrote slowly, "Mr. Whitfield, they don't need me. They need their father. I was just here to show them they're worth staying for. I'm sorry I couldn't be both. Grace." She folded it, set it on the desk downstairs, went back to her room, zipped the duffel bag, picked up the jar of rocks Caleb had collected for her, held it against her chest. At 4:47 a.m., she walked out the front door. The early morning bus to Memphis left from the station on Sheridan Road at 5:15. She made it with 3 minutes to spare. She sat by the window, watched the mansions of Lake Forest slide past in the gray light. Then the suburbs. Then the highway. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes. And somewhere behind her, in a house that was just beginning to feel like a home, 2 boys were sleeping peacefully, trusting that when they woke up, she'd be there. She wouldn't be. Ethan's eyes opened at 6:12 a.m., same time every morning. His body had learned the rhythm now: wake up, find Grace, start the day. 3 weeks, and it had become the most reliable thing in his life. He threw the covers off. Caleb was still sleeping, curled on his side, one arm hanging off the bed. Ethan didn't wake him. He padded barefoot down the hall to Grace's room, the way he'd done every morning since the second week. He'd knock. She'd say, "Come in." He'd sit on the edge of her bed while she tied her shoes, and they'd walk down to the kitchen together. She'd make coffee. He'd get the cereal bowls. It was their thing. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. Harder. "Grace." Silence. He pushed the door open. The bed was made. Tight corners, smooth pillows. The way Grace always made it, except this time it didn't look slept in. The nightstand was empty. The small lamp she kept on at night was off. The closet door was open. Nothing inside. Ethan stood in the doorway. His eyes moved to the windowsill, where Caleb's rock collection had been the jar with the handwritten labels found by the mailbox from the backyard, the gray one with the red crayon smiley face. All gone. His hands started shaking. "Grace?" He said it louder. Then again. Then he was running. Down the hall. Past his parents, past his father's room. Down the stairs. Kitchen empty. Laundry room empty. The supply closet she'd been locked in that first day, empty. "Grace!" He was screaming now. The sound ripped through the house and hit every wall. Caleb appeared at the top of the stairs. Eyes wide. Hair wild. He looked at his brother and knew. He didn't need to ask. He could see it on Ethan's face. Caleb came down the stairs fast. Too fast. Tripped on the last step, caught himself, kept going. He ran to Grace's room, stood in the doorway, looked at the empty windowsill where his rocks used to be. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Then his whole body started trembling, that violent, silent shaking that happened when something was too big for a 5-year-old to hold. Ethan grabbed his brother's hand. She's somewhere. She has to be somewhere. They searched together. Every room, every floor, the garage, the back porch, the garden shed. Ethan threw open doors and screamed her name, and Caleb followed behind him, mute shaking, clutching his brother's shirt. Margaret heard them from the kitchen. Came running. Boys, where is she? Ethan's voice was raw. Where's Grace? Margaret looked at their faces. Looked toward Grace's room. Her stomach dropped. Wait here. Where is she? Ethan, wait here. Let me. Where is she? Margaret ran to Grace's room, saw the made bed, the empty closet, came back to the hallway, face white. I'll call her. Let me call her phone. She dialed. Voicemail. Dialed again. Voicemail. Ethan was pacing, back and forth, fists clenched, his breathing getting faster, louder. The old rhythm coming back, the one Grace had spent 3 weeks helping him unlearn. Caleb sank to the floor, pulled his knees to his chest, started rocking. She left, Ethan said, his voice cracked. She left just like everyone else. We don't know that. She's gone. Her stuff is gone. She's gone. He kicked the wall, then kicked it again. She promised. She said she'd stay. She looked me in the face and she promised. He grabbed a vase from the hallway table and hurled it. It exploded against the wall, water and flowers and glass everywhere. Margaret jumped back. Ethan! She lied. She lied to us. She's just like all of them. He was sobbing now. Rage and grief tangled together so tight neither one could breathe. He swept everything off the table, a lamp, a picture frame. Margaret's reading glasses. Everything crashed to the floor. Caleb screamed. Not a word. That sound. That awful animal sound that hadn't come out of him in weeks. It filled the hallway and bounced off the walls and made Margaret press her hand to her mouth. This was what the house sounded like before Grace. This was the sound of 2 boys who'd been left again. Marcus heard it from his office. He'd been up since 5 a.m., couldn't sleep, found himself at his desk going through emails he didn't care about. The crash brought him to his feet. The screaming brought him to the hallway at a dead run. He found Margaret against the wall. Glass on the floor. Ethan destroying everything within reach. Caleb on the floor, rocking, that sound pouring out of him. What happened? Margaret's eyes were red. Grace is gone. She left. What do you mean she left? Her room is empty. Her things are gone. She's not answering her phone. Marcus stood there, watching his sons fall apart, watching 3 weeks of healing crumble in real time, watching everything Grace had built, every small moment, every hum, every bedtime story, every morning greeting collapse like a building with its foundation pulled out. Then Margaret handed him a piece of paper. I found this on your desk. He unfolded it, read it again. Mr. Whitfield, they don't need me. They need their father. I was just here to show them they're worth staying for. I'm sorry I couldn't be both. Grace. His hands shook. He read it a 3rd time. And then he understood. She'd heard Robert. Every word. The threats, the severance package, the Swiss nanny with the PhD. She'd heard it all and she'd done the math. If she stayed, Marcus would lose the company. The boys would lose their future. And she'd be the reason. So she took herself out of the equation. The way she'd probably done her entire life. Step aside. Don't cause trouble. Don't be the reason someone else loses something. Marcus folded the note, put it in his pocket, looked at his sons. Ethan had stopped throwing things. He was sitting on the floor surrounded by broken glass, sobbing into his hands. Caleb was beside him, still rocking, still making that sound, but softer now. Fading. Like a siren running out of power. Marcus walked over, got down on the floor, right there in the glass and water and broken flowers. He put one hand on Ethan's back, one hand on Caleb's. Dad. Ethan looked up, face destroyed. She's gone. I know. She promised me. She looked at me and she said she wouldn't leave. I know. Why does everyone leave? Marcus pulled his son in, held him against his chest. Ethan fought it for a second, resisted, stiffened, then collapsed into it. His small hands grabbed his father's shirt and held on. Caleb stopped rocking, looked at his father, then crawled over and pressed himself against Marcus's side. Marcus held them both, on the floor, in the wreckage. And he felt something shift inside him. Not grief this time, not shame, something harder, something with an edge, anger, not at Grace, at himself, at 5 years of absence, at every flight and every meeting and every deal that kept him in a boardroom while his sons were drowning. At Robert and his photo and his Swiss nanny. At every decision he'd made since Victoria died that put distance between him and the only things that mattered. But more than anger, resolve. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just moves. He pulled back, looked at his boys. Get dressed. Ethan wiped his face. What? Both of you. Get dressed. Now. Why? Because we're going to get her. Ethan stared at him. Get her. She's gone. She took the bus. I know where she went. Get dressed. Something in his father's voice made Ethan stop arguing. He grabbed Caleb's hand. They ran upstairs. Marcus stood up. Glass fell from his pants. He pulled out his phone. His pilot answered on the second ring. Mr. Whitfield. Get the jet fueled. Midway. 30 minutes. Sir, we need a flight plan. Memphis. File it now. I'll be there in 20. He hung up. Turned to Margaret. I need you to hold things down here. Margaret looked at him, at the glass on the floor, at the broken vase, at the man standing in the middle of it all with a piece of paper in his pocket, and something in his eyes she hadn't seen in 5 years. Go, she said. Bring her home. The boys were dressed in 4 minutes. Mismatched socks. Caleb's shirt was inside out. Ethan had his shoes on the wrong feet. Nobody cared. They ran to the car. Marcus started the engine, pulled out of the driveway fast enough to scatter gravel. Nobody spoke on the way to Midway. Ethan sat in the back with Caleb holding his brother's hand, both of them staring straight ahead. Marcus drove, jaw tight, mind racing. He didn't know what he'd say to her, didn't know if she'd come back, didn't know if he had the right to ask. All he knew was that a woman who'd held his sons together was sitting on a bus alone, heading back to a city where nobody was waiting for her because she believed she wasn't worth the trouble of staying. And he was not going to let that be the end. The jet was on the tarmac when they arrived. Engine running, steps down. The pilot met them at the door. Memphis International, sir. Flight time approximately 90 minutes. Let's go. They were halfway up the stairs when a voice cut across the tarmac. Marcus. He turned. Robert Langford was jogging toward the plane. Tie loosened. Face pale. Out of breath. Like he'd driven here too fast from wherever he'd been. Marcus's jaw clenched. Robert, I swear to God if you're here to... Just stop. Please, 1 minute. I don't have a minute. Then I'll talk fast. Robert stopped at the bottom of the steps, bent over, hands on his knees, breathing hard. Then he straightened up, and Marcus saw something he'd never seen on Robert Langford's face. Fear. Real fear. Not the boardroom kind. The kind that comes when you realize you've already lost the thing you should have been holding. I had a daughter, Robert said. Marcus blinked. What? Emma. She's 32 now, lives in Portland. Robert's voice was shaking. Her mother and I divorced when she was 8. I got the company. Janet got custody. I told myself I'd stay involved. I'd call every week, show up to every birthday, be there. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. I showed up to 3. 3 birthdays in 24 years. The rest I was in meetings, always in meetings, closing something, building something, something that felt so important I couldn't put it down. Marcus didn't move. She stopped calling when she was 26, No fight, no big argument, just stopped. I called her once. She picked up and said, "Dad, I don't have the energy to miss you anymore." Then she hung up. Robert's eyes were wet. She got married last spring. I found out from LinkedIn. LinkedIn Marcus. My daughter got married and I learned about it the same way I learn about mergers. The tarmac was quiet except for the jet engines. I wasn't invited. Didn't even know until I saw the photos. Her in a white dress, smiling. Some man I've never met standing beside her. And her mother Janet, she was there. Front row, crying. Happy. Robert's voice broke. And I was in my office, reading a quarterly report. He looked at the boys standing at the top of the jet stairs. Ethan with his shoes on the wrong feet. Caleb with his inside-out shirt. 2 5-year-old boys chasing after the one person who made them feel seen. "I called you that day, remember?" Robert said. "The day I came to your house with that photo, that folder, that Swiss nanny. I told myself I was protecting the company, protecting you, but I wasn't." His jaw trembled. "I was jealous." Marcus stared at him. "Jealous? Of you. Of the fact that you still had a chance. Your boys are 5, Marcus. 5. They're right there. They still want you. They still reach for you. My daughter doesn't reach for me anymore. She stopped reaching a long time ago, and I didn't even notice." Robert stepped back. "Don't do what I did. Don't let a man in a suit tell you what matters. I was that man. I was wrong." He looked at Marcus, and 20 years of partnership passed between them. "Go get her." Marcus's throat was so tight he couldn't speak. He nodded. Once. Robert stepped back, watched the stairs fold up, watched the door close, watched the jet taxi and turn and accelerate down the runway. He stood on the tarmac alone. The jet noise faded. The sky was clear. And Robert Langford, a man who hadn't cried since his mother's funeral in 1994, stood there with his hands in his pockets and wept. Inside the plane, the boys sat across from Marcus. Nobody talked for the first 20 minutes. Then Ethan spoke. "Dad, how do you know where she is?" "I don't. Not exactly." "Then how are we going to find her?" Marcus thought about it. About Grace. About everything he'd learned in 3 weeks. The hymns she hummed. The way she bowed her head in quiet moments. The reference letter from a church shelter. The way she prayed like it was breathing, natural, necessary, constant. "She'll be at a church." "How do you know?" "Because that's where she goes when she needs help. It's who she is." Ethan looked out the window. "What if she doesn't want to come back?" "Then I'll ask her again." "What if she still says no?" "Then I'll keep asking." Caleb shifted in his seat, reached into his pocket, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. A drawing. He'd grabbed it before they left. He held it up for Marcus to see. 4 figures, 2 small, 1 tall, and 1 with dark hair and kind hands. All of them under a blue sky. Wide, bright blue. No black anywhere. Marcus took the drawing, held it carefully. "This is beautiful, Caleb." Caleb pointed at the figure with kind hands, then pointed south, toward Memphis. "Yeah, buddy," Marcus said. "We're going to find her." They landed at Memphis International at 11:42 a.m. A car was waiting. Marcus gave the driver the only address he had, the church shelter listed on Grace's reference letter. Calvary Mission Baptist Church on Auburn Avenue. The driver pulled up to a small brick building on a quiet street. Wooden double doors. A hand-painted sign above the entrance. No stained glass. No steeple. Just a building where people came when they had nowhere else to go. Marcus stepped out. The boys followed. Ethan reached for his father's hand. Caleb reached for Ethan's. The 3 of them walked up the cracked concrete path. Marcus pushed the door open. The church was nearly empty. Wooden pews, a simple cross on the far wall, sunlight coming through plain windows, and at the very front, Kneeling alone, her forehead almost touching the back of the pew in front of her, was Grace Monroe. Her shoulders were shaking. She was crying, praying through it the way she always did, quiet, steady, broken. She didn't hear the door, didn't hear their footsteps, didn't hear anything until a voice she recognized called her name. Grace. Her head came up. She turned, and everything stopped. Ethan was standing in the aisle, tears pouring down his face. Caleb beside him, Marcus behind them both. She pressed her hand to her mouth, shook her head, like she was seeing something impossible, like the prayer she'd been whispering had walked through the door and answered itself. Ethan broke first. He let go of his father's hand and ran. Full sprint down the aisle, crashed into Grace so hard he nearly knocked her over. His arms went around her neck and he held on like the world was ending. "You left," he was sobbing. "You promised you wouldn't leave and you left." "I know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. You said you weren't like everyone else. You said you'd stay." "I know what I said." "Then why?" Grace held him tighter. "Because I was trying to protect you, all of you. I thought if I stayed I'd make things worse." Caleb reached them, didn't run, walked, slow, deliberate, like he needed every step to believe this was real. He stood in front of Grace, looked at her with those wide, quiet eyes. Then he opened his mouth. "Don't go." 2 words. The first words he'd spoken in over a year. Rough and small and barely louder than a breath. But they landed in that church like thunder. Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled. She pulled Caleb in with her other arm, held both boys against her, rocked them, let them cry, let herself cry. Marcus walked down the aisle, each step heavier than the last. He reached them, stood there, looking down at this woman on her knees in a church in Memphis, holding his sons like they were her own. "I read your note," he said. Grace looked up, eyes red, face wet. "Mr. Whitfield." "Marcus." She blinked. "My name is Marcus, and I need you to hear something." He knelt down, right there on the church floor, eye level. "You wrote that they don't need you, that they just need their father. But you're wrong. They need us both. And I—" His voice gave out. He swallowed, started again. "I need help, Grace. I don't know how to be a father. I've had 5 years, and I still don't know. But you walked into my house with a duffel bag and a prayer, and you showed my sons they were worth loving. You showed me that. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what comes next. But I know this: we didn't fly 1,000 miles to leave without you." Ethan looked up. "Come home, Grace, please." Caleb squeezed her hand. Didn't speak again. Didn't need to. The 2 words he'd already given were enough. Grace looked at Marcus, at Ethan, at Caleb. 3 faces asking her the same question. 3 people who'd crossed a country to stand in front of her and say what no one in her life had ever said. "We need you. Stay." She wiped her eyes, took a breath, and nodded. "Okay, I'll come home." Ethan buried his face in her shoulder. Caleb pressed closer, and Marcus reached out and put his hand over Grace's. Gently, like he was holding something fragile and precious and irreplaceable. They stayed like that for a long time. 4 people in a small church on a quiet street in Memphis. Nobody moved. Nobody needed to. The silence held them the way Grace had held the boys all those nights, steady, warm, unbreaking. And somewhere in that silence, something finished healing. Not completely, not perfectly. Healing never works that way. But enough. Enough to stand. Enough to walk out of that church together. Enough to get back on the plane and fly home. Enough to begin. The flight back to Chicago was different. Ethan sat next to Grace, not across from her, not a seat away. Right next to her, his shoulder pressed against her arm, his hand resting on her sleeve like he needed to feel the fabric to believe she was real. Every few minutes he'd look up at her. Quick. Just a glance, making sure she was still there. Then he'd look away, stare out the window, pretend he wasn't afraid. Caleb sat on her other side. He hadn't spoken again since those 2 words in the church. But he'd taken the jar of rocks from Grace's duffel bag, the one she'd packed when she left, and set it on his lap. He held it with both hands the entire flight. Like it was proof. Like if the rocks were back, everything else would be too. Marcus sat across from them. He didn't work. Didn't check his phone. Didn't open his laptop. He just watched his sons lean into a woman who'd tried to walk away from them and couldn't. A woman who got on a bus at 5 a.m. because she thought her absence was a gift. A woman whose only crime was loving two boys so much she was willing to break her own heart to protect them. He watched, and he thought about Victoria. Not the way he usually thought about her, the hospital, the blood, the hand going cold. He thought about her alive, laughing. The way she'd curl up on the couch and read with her feet tucked under her. The way she'd sing in the kitchen off-key, loud happy. The way she'd looked at him the day they found out about the twins. Not scared, not overwhelmed, just sure. "We're going to be great at this," she'd said. He hadn't believed her then. He definitely hadn't believed it after she died. But watching Grace, watching the way she held his sons, like they were made of something precious, the way she hummed without thinking, the way she prayed like breathing. He started to wonder if maybe Victoria had been right. Not about him alone, about the possibility that someone someday would show up and help him find his way back. The plane touched down at Midway, just after 3 p.m. Margaret was waiting by the car. She saw Grace come down the steps and pressed her hand to her chest. "Thank God," she said. "Just that. Nothing else." Grace smiled. Small, tired, real. "Hi, Margaret." "Don't you ever do that again." "I won't." "I mean it, Grace. My heart can't take it." They drove home. The boys fell asleep in the car, Ethan's head on Grace's shoulder, Caleb's head on Ethan's. Marcus drove, kept his eyes on the road, kept his hands steady. But every few seconds he glanced in the rear-view mirror at the three of them, his sons, and the woman who'd brought them back to life. He pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, sat there for a moment. "Grace?" She looked up. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for coming to get me." He nodded, got out, opened the back door, carried Caleb inside, the boy limp and warm against his chest, heavier than he remembered. Grace walked behind him with Ethan, who woke up on the stairs but didn't let go of her hand. They put the boys to bed. Grace pulled the blankets up, tucked them in, set the jar of rocks back on the windowsill. Marcus stood in the doorway watching. "Good night, boys," Grace whispered. Ethan opened one eye. "You'll be here in the morning. I'll be here in the morning. Promise?" "Promise." He closed his eye. Slept. Grace and Marcus walked downstairs together. The house was quiet. Margaret had gone home. The kitchen was clean. The broken vase from that morning had been swept up. Someone, probably Margaret, had put fresh flowers in a new vase on the hall table. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of Grace. They sat at the kitchen table. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Marcus said, "I need to tell you something." Grace wrapped her hands around the mug. "Okay." When Victoria died, I made a decision. I didn't make it consciously, it just happened. Like a switch flipping. I decided that if I couldn't feel the pain, it couldn't destroy me. So I turned it off. All of it. The grief, the love, the fear, everything. I just turned it off and poured everything I had into work. He stared at his coffee. I told myself the boys were better off with professionals. People trained for this. People who knew what to do with grief and loss and childhood trauma. I told myself I was providing for them, giving them the best money could buy. You were. I was hiding. I know that now. Every nanny I hired was a wall between me and them. Every business trip was a door I closed. I wasn't providing for my sons' Grace. I was running from them. Because every time I looked at them, I saw her, and I couldn't handle it. Grace didn't say anything, just listened. "Ethan has her eyes," Marcus continued. "Caleb has her hands. Did you know that the way he holds a pencil, that's Victoria? She used to draw, Not professionally, just doodles. Little sketches on napkins on the backs of receipts. She'd leave them everywhere. I'd find them in my suit pockets in the car in my briefcase. Little drawings of us, of the house, of the life we were building. His voice cracked. After she died, I threw them all away. Couldn't look at them. Couldn't stand the reminder. And now my son draws every single day the same way she did, and I didn't even notice. I didn't notice because I wasn't here. Grace reached across the table, put her hand on his. You're here now. Is that enough? It's a start. He looked at her. I don't know how to do this, Grace. I don't know how to be what they need. Nobody does. You figure it out as you go. How? How do you figure it out? You show up, every day, even when it's hard, even when you don't have the right words, even when you mess up, you just show up. Is that what you did when you got here? That's all I did. I didn't have a strategy. I didn't have a degree. I just stayed. Why you didn't know us? You didn't owe us anything. You could have walked out that first day when Ethan threw a plate at your head. Grace looked down at her coffee. Because I know what it's like to grow up without someone staying. My father left when I was 4. My mother worked 3 jobs. I raised myself mostly. And my younger brother. I know what it feels like to be a kid in a big house where nobody sees you. I know what it sounds like when the door closes and you're alone. She paused. When I walked into your house and saw those boys, I didn't see problem children. I didn't see the things the nannies wrote in their resignation letters. I saw 2 kids who were screaming because it was the only way anyone would look at them. And I thought, I can't fix this. I can't replace their mother. I can't make their father come home. But I can stay. I can be in the room. I can let them know that someone sees them. That's why you didn't leave when they locked you in the closet. That's why I sat on the bucket and read my Bible. Because if I walked out that door, they'd have proof. Proof that they were right, that everyone leaves, that nobody can handle them, that they're too much. And I wasn't going to give them that proof. Marcus shook his head slowly. 14 nannies. Behavioral specialists. A woman from Switzerland with 2 doctorates. And you a housekeeper from Memphis. You're the one who reached them. I didn't reach them, Mr. Witt Marcus. I just didn't leave. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a while, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm. The house settled around them. And for the first time since Victoria died, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Not happiness that was too big, too far away still. Something smaller. Quieter. Hope. The first month after Grace came back, Marcus kept his word. He stayed home, canceled the London follow-up meetings, delegated the Tokyo portfolio, told his assistant to clear his calendar for 30 days. 30 days, she'd said, stunned. Mr. Whitfield, you've never taken more than 2 days off. Then I'm overdue. He was terrible at it, couldn't sit still, kept reaching for his phone during breakfast, kept drifting toward his office during playtime. His body was in the house, but his mind was still somewhere over the Atlantic, still calculating, still closing. The boys noticed. Dad, you're not listening, Ethan said one afternoon. They were sitting on the living room floor. Ethan had been talking about a bug he'd found in the garden. A beetle, green and shiny. He'd talked about it for 3 solid minutes. Marcus looked up from his phone. I am listening. A beetle. You're looking at your phone. I can do both. No, you can't. Grace never looks at her phone when we talk. The words stung, because they were true. Marcus put the phone in his pocket. Tell me about the beetle. Ethan studied him, suspicious. It was green, and it had these little lines on its back, like stripes. Where'd you find it? By the fence, near the roses. Grace said it was a Japanese beetle. She said they eat rose leaves, but they're still beautiful. She said that, yeah, she says everything's beautiful if you look at it right. Marcus smiled. She might be onto something. Ethan picked at the carpet. Dad. Yeah. Are you going to stay this time for real? For real. Because you said that before, and then you went to London. I know. And then you went to Tokyo. I know, Ethan. So how do I know you're not going to do it again? Marcus took a breath. You don't. Not yet. I haven't earned that yet. All I can do is keep showing up until you believe me. Ethan thought about that. Grace says trust is like a rock collection. You build it one piece at a time. Grace is pretty smart. She's the smartest person I know. He paused. Don't tell her I said that. I won't. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Dad? Yeah. Can you come look at the beetle with me? It might still be there. Marcus stood up. Let's go. They walked outside together, father and son, into the garden, looking for a beetle that was probably long gone. And it didn't matter. None of it mattered. Not the beetle, not the roses, not the Japanese name or the striped shell. What mattered was that Marcus Whitfield was on his knees in the dirt next to his 5-year-old son, looking at something small and ordinary and alive. And for the first time not wanting to be anywhere else. The weeks went on. Marcus learned, slowly, painfully. He learned that Ethan needed to be heard more than he needed to be managed. That the outbursts weren't defiance, they were overflow. Too much feeling in too small a body with no safe place to put it. He learned that Caleb communicated in ways most people missed. A drawing left on the table. A rock placed on someone's desk. A hand reaching out in the dark. The boy had an entire language, you just had to learn to read it. He learned that bedtime was sacred. That Grace read to them every night, and now Marcus sat beside her listening, adding his voice sometimes. They took turns. Grace read the soft parts. Marcus tried the voices. He was terrible at it. Ethan told him his bear sounded like a frog. Caleb laughed a real laugh, sudden and bright like a bird startled into flight. It was the first time Marcus had heard Caleb laugh. He had to leave the room afterward, stood in the hallway with his back against the wall, pressing his hand over his eyes, breathing through it. Grace found him there a minute later. You okay? I've never heard him laugh before. He's got a good one. He sounds like Victoria. Grace didn't say anything, just stood beside him. Let the moment be what it was. He wiped his face. I've missed so much, Grace. You've missed a lot, but you haven't missed everything. He's 5. You have time. Do I? Yeah, Marcus, you do. He looked at her. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just say what's true and hope it lands. It landed. Every time. Robert Langford called twice during those first weeks. Marcus didn't answer. The third time, Marcus picked up. What do you need, Robert? I need to know you're okay. I'm okay. And the boys? Better. Getting better. And Grace? She's here. She's staying. Silence on the line. Then, I'm glad. I mean that. I know you do. Marcus, I owe you an apology. Not just for the photo. For all of it. For 20 years of telling you the company came first. For making you believe that a quarterly report mattered more than reading your kids a bedtime story. You didn't make me believe that. I chose it. We both chose it, and we were both wrong. Another pause. Then Robert said, I called Emma. Marcus sat up. You did? Took me 3 days to work up the nerve. She didn't answer the first 2 times. Third time she picked up. I think she was surprised. What did you say? I said I was sorry, that I know sorry doesn't cover it, that I missed her wedding and I'll never forgive myself for that, that I don't expect her to let me back in, but I wanted her to know I'm trying. What did she say? Robert's voice got thick. She said, It's about time, Dad. And then she cried. And then I cried. 2 grown adults on the phone crying like children. That's not weakness, Robert. No, I know that now. He cleared his throat. She invited me to Portland, next month. Said she wants me to meet her husband. Go. I'm going. Already booked the flight. First time in 30 years I've booked a personal flight. Marcus almost laughed. The world isn't going to end because you take a weekend off. No, it's not. Robert paused. Take care of those boys, Marcus. And take care of Grace. She's the best thing that ever happened to that house. I know. Good. Don't forget it. He hung up. 2 months in, Caleb started talking again. Not all at once. Not in full sentences. But words. Small ones. Careful ones. Like a door opening an inch at a time. Morning, Grace. First full sentence in 14 months. Said over serial eyes down voice barely above a whisper. Grace didn't make a big deal of it. Didn't gasp or celebrate or call Marcus from the other room. She just smiled and said, "Morning, sweetheart. Sleep okay?" Caleb nodded. Yeah. Good. That was it. But Marcus was standing in the hallway. He'd heard. He turned around and walked into his office and sat behind his desk and pressed his palms flat against the wood because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. His son was talking. His silent, broken drawing on the wall's son was talking, and the voice that came out was soft and careful and sounded exactly like Victoria's did when she was thinking out loud. He opened his desk drawer, the one where he'd kept the photograph. Victoria, 3 days before delivery, hand on her belly, laughing. He picked it up, looked at it for the first time without flinching. "They're going to be okay," he whispered. "I think they're going to be okay." He put the photograph on his desk, face up, where the boys could see it, where he could see it, where it belonged. 3 months after Grace came back on a Saturday evening in late October, Marcus called the boys and Grace into the living room. Grace was confused. The boys were suspicious. "Sit down," Marcus said. "Is something wrong?" Grace asked. "Nothing's wrong. Just sit." She sat on the couch. The boys piled in next to her. Ethan on one side, Caleb on the other. The way they always sat now, flanking her like bodyguards. Like sentinels protecting the most important person in their world. Marcus stood in front of them. He'd rehearsed this. In his office, in the shower, in the car. He'd practiced the words a dozen times. But now, looking at the three of them on that couch, everything he'd prepared evaporated. So he just talked. The way Grace had taught him. Honest. Simple. True. 5 years ago, I lost Victoria. And when I lost her, I lost myself. I stopped being a husband because there was no one to be a husband to. And I stopped being a father because I was too afraid. Too afraid that if I loved these boys the way they deserved and something happened, I wouldn't survive it. So I left. Not all at once, but I left. Flight by flight, meeting by meeting. I left. Ethan was watching him. Caleb was watching him. And then Grace showed up, with a duffel bag and a mop and more courage than I've ever had in my entire life. And she did something I couldn't do. She stayed. He looked at Grace. Her eyes were already glistening. "You didn't just teach my sons to pray grace. You didn't just teach them to sleep through the night or carry a plate to the sink or talk about their feelings. You taught me. You taught me that being present is more important than being successful. That showing up scared is better than not showing up at all. That love doesn't fix everything, but it's the only thing that gives you a reason to try." He reached into his pocket, pulled out 2 envelopes, handed them to the boys. "These are from Ethan and Caleb. They've been working on them for a week. They wanted to give them to you themselves." Ethan went first. He held out his envelope. His hand was trembling. "Open it." Grace took it. Inside was a card. Construction paper folded in half. On the front, a crayon drawing 4 people standing in front of a house. A yellow sun, a blue sky, green grass. And in the middle, holding both boys' hands, a woman with dark hair and a wide smile. Inside, in Ethan's careful, wobbly handwriting, "Dear Grace, will you stay forever? You are the best person I know. You didn't leave when I threw things. You didn't leave when I was mean. You didn't leave. Love, Ethan." Grace's hand went to her mouth. Caleb handed her his. His envelope was smaller. Inside a drawing. Not dark, not faceless. 4 figures, all with faces, all with smiles, all standing under the widest blue sky he'd ever drawn. And beneath it, in letters that tilted and leaned like they'd been written with enormous concentration, "Please stay. Love, Caleb." Grace couldn't hold it. The tears came. She pulled both boys into her arms and held them against her chest and cried. Not sad crying. The other kind. The kind that comes when something you stopped believing in shows up at your door and says your name. "I'm staying," she said. "I'm not going anywhere. Ever." Ethan pulled back. "Dad has something too." Grace looked at Marcus through her tears. He knelt down in front of her, took her hand. "I'm not good at this. I've spent 20 years learning how to close deals and read contracts and negotiate with billionaires. But I never learned how to say what matters to the people who matter." He swallowed. "Grace, I'm asking you to stay. Not as the housekeeper, not as the maid, as part of this family. Help me raise these boys. Help me build a home. Not the kind with marble floors and chandeliers, we have that. I mean a real home. The kind Victoria wanted. The kind where people sit at the same table and eat burned toast and laugh and fight and forgive each other." He squeezed her hand. "I can't do this alone. I've tried. I failed. I need you. They need you. This family needs you. So I'm asking, will you stay?" Grace looked at him. At the man who'd knelt on a church floor in Memphis and asked her to come home. At the man who'd burned toast every morning for a month trying to learn how to make breakfast. At the man who sat in the dirt looking for beetles because his son asked him to. "Yes," she said. "I'll stay." Marcus exhaled, long and slow, like he'd been holding his breath for 5 years and finally remembered how to let it go. Ethan jumped off the couch. "She said yes. She said yes." He ran around the living room like a plane, arms out making engine sounds. The first time he'd expressed joy by running instead of breaking something. Caleb smiled, wide and open and unguarded. Then he slid off the couch, walked to the fireplace mantel, and placed a small gray rock next to Victoria's photograph. The one with the red crayon smiley face. The first one he'd ever given Grace. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all just looked at it. The rock and the photograph, side by side. Old love and new love. Grief and grace. Loss and what comes after. That night Marcus sat in the boys' room for bedtime. Grace was there too. She read the first book. Marcus read the second. His bare voice still sounded like a frog. Ethan told him so. Caleb laughed that bright sudden laugh that sounded like Victoria. And Marcus didn't leave the room this time. He sat there and let the sound fill him. Let it echo through 5 years of silence and empty hallways and locked doors. Let it reach the places he'd sealed off. The places where his wife still lived, where his fear still waited, where the man he used to be was standing in a delivery room holding a hand that was getting cold. He let it in. All of it. The grief and the joy and the terror and the beauty. He let it in because Grace had shown him something no one else could, that you don't have to choose between broken and whole. You can be both. You can be shattered and standing. You can carry the loss and still reach for what's next. After the boys fell asleep, Grace and Marcus walked downstairs. They stood in the kitchen. The same kitchen where Caleb had drawn a faceless figure on the wall. The same kitchen where Ethan threw a plate at a stranger's head. The same kitchen where Grace had hummed hymns and set out sketch pads and made 2 boys feel for the first time like they mattered. "Grace, yeah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. I'm always honest. That day you left, when you got on the bus, did you really think you were doing the right thing?" She was quiet for a moment. "I thought I was doing the only thing. Robert made it clear if I stayed you'd lose the company. Your reputation, everything you'd built. I couldn't be the reason your boys lost their future. So you sacrificed yourself. I'm used to that. I know, and that's what I need to talk about." He turned to face her. You don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to be the one who steps aside so everyone else can stand. You don't have to make yourself smaller so the room feels comfortable. Not in this house. Not with us. Grace's chin trembled. Old habits. I know. I've got plenty of my own. But we're done with that, both of us. No more running, no more hiding, no more walking outdoors at 4 a.m. because we think our absence is a gift. She nodded, wiped her eyes. Deal. Deal. They shook on it. A handshake in a kitchen at 10 p.m. The most important deal Marcus Whitfield ever closed. No contract, no lawyers, no board approval, just two people who'd been through the worst of it standing in the light, choosing to stay. In the years that followed, the Whitfield house became something it had never been. Loud, messy, alive. Ethan grew into a boy who still had a temper, but learned to use his words before his fists. He started playing soccer, channeled his energy into something that had rules and teammates and a reason to run. He still had bad days, still slammed doors sometimes. But he always came back, always apologized, always found Grace in the kitchen and said, "I'm sorry I was a jerk." And Grace would say, "You weren't a jerk. Whoa. You were having a hard time. There's a difference." Caleb talked more every month, quietly at first, then in full paragraphs. He never became loud, that wasn't who he was. But his silence stopped being a wall and became a choice. He drew constantly. Beautiful detailed drawings that covered every surface of his room. His teacher called them remarkable. Marcus framed the first one, the four figures under a blue sky, and hung it in his office next to Victoria's photograph. Marcus sold the London portfolio, restructured the company, cut his travel by 80%. Robert Langford went to Portland, met his son-in-law, sat at his daughter's dinner table for the first time in 24 years. Emma didn't forgive him right away. Forgiveness doesn't work like that. But she opened the door, and Robert, for once in his life, walked through it. Grace stayed. Not because she was asked. Not because she was paid. Because she belonged. She was there for the first day of kindergarten, holding Caleb's hand at the school gate. She was there for Ethan's first soccer game, screaming louder than any parent in the stands. She was there for the nightmares that still came, sometimes sitting on the edge of the bed, humming that old hymn until the shaking stopped. She was there for the morning Marcus finally took Victoria's photograph off his desk and moved it to the living room mantel next to Caleb's gray rock, where everyone could see it. "Are you sure?" Grace had asked. "Yeah. She shouldn't be in a drawer. She shouldn't be hidden. The boys should see her every day." "They look like her." "I know. Took me 5 years to see it. But I see it now." On the twins' 6th birthday, Marcus came home early. Carried a cake through the front door. Chocolate. Lopsided. He'd made it himself. Margaret had supervised. Grace had cleaned up the disaster he'd left in the kitchen. The boys blew out the candles. Ethan wished for a dog. Caleb wished quietly, didn't say what for. Grace cut the cake. Marcus served it. They ate together at the kitchen table, the same table where a year ago nobody sat. After the cake, after the presents, after the boys had gone to bed with chocolate on their faces and joy in their chests, Marcus and Grace sat on the back porch. The lake was dark and still. The sky was full of stars. "1 year," Marcus said. 1 year. "You know what I was doing on their 5th birthday? I was in Dubai. Closing a deal I don't even remember the details of. I sent the boys a gift through my assistant. Didn't call. Didn't video chat. Just a box with a card I didn't write. And tonight? Tonight, I made a lopsided chocolate cake and watched my sons blow out candles and ate frosting with my fingers." He shook his head. "Victoria would have laughed at that cake. She would have loved that cake. Yeah, she would have." They sat in silence. The good kind. The kind that doesn't need filling. The kind that two people earn after they've walked through something hard together and come out the other side. "Grace." "Yeah. Thank you." "For what?" For knocking on their door that first night, when you didn't have to, when the job description said mop floors and fold laundry. You knocked on their door and sat in that chair and told them a story about baby birds. And everything changed. Everything was already changing. I just sat still long enough for them to notice. Marcus smiled. You know, for a woman who showed up with a duffel bag and a church reference, you're pretty wise. And for a man who burned toast for a month straight, you're a pretty good father. He laughed. A real laugh. The kind that starts deep and rises and fills the space around it. And somewhere in the house through an open window, Ethan heard it and smiled in his sleep. And Caleb rolled over, peaceful, dreaming about wide blue skies. And Grace Monroe sat on the back porch of a mansion in Lake Forest, Illinois, 1,000 miles from the church in Memphis, where she'd been found on her knees, and she knew the way you know things in your bones. The way you know rain is coming, or a child is hurting, or a prayer has been answered. She knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because the house was big. Not because the salary was generous. Not because a billionaire had flown a private jet to bring her home. Because 2 boys needed someone to stay. And she stayed. That's all it was. That's all it ever needed to be. In a world that teaches you to leave when things get hard, to protect yourself, to keep your distance, to build walls higher than your grief. Sometimes the most radical thing a person can do is simply refuse to go. Grace Monroe refused to go. And in doing so, she didn't just save 2 boys. She saved their father. She saved a family. She rebuilt a home from the inside out, not with money or degrees or strategies, but with presence, with patience, with the stubborn, unwavering belief that every broken thing is worth holding. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes that's exactly what grace looks like. Not a sermon, not a miracle, not a light from the sky. Just a woman with a mop and a prayer who walked into a house full of shattered things and said, "I'm not leaving," and meant it.